Good morning to our listeners and viewers of the Real Stuff podcast. Today is Wednesday, and we have a featured guest by the name of Dale Mahfood. Dale Mahfood was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and he's a writer. And we'll allow him to talk about himself. I am here with Flavius, our host. I am Courtney, your co-host. And so back to you, Flavius.
Yeah, but you just said it. Mr. Mahfood, tell our listeners and viewers a little about yourself.
Okay, I was born in Kingston, as Courtney said, and lived in Kingston till I was about 15, and then moved to the States back in the 70s. And then I've kind of, been all over. Florida seems to be my home base. I haven't always loved Florida because it's so hot, but the older I get, I appreciate the heat. But I've lived in London, I've lived in Washington, D.C., Georgia, Rhode Island, just kind of all over. And then I'm coming back to Florida, getting my degree, my master's degree in English education. And now I work as an English teacher in Broward County schools, as well as teaching college courses for Florida International University. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's just one side of you.
Yes.
So tell us a little about the other side.
There are many sides. Okay. As far as writing is concerned, I've always kind of had a penchant towards it. When I was in high school, I did write 2 poems. The first poem, believe it or not, was called Rasta Man. And of course, coming from Jamaica, this was my first year in the States. I wrote a poem, a nice little poem. Of course, I didn't have a clue what I was talking about, Bob Marley and the whole thing. That's all I knew. But, and then I wrote another poem. It was kind of an angsty poem. I was a teenager. So, when you're a teenager, you find problem with your family, and it was kind of a silly poem. But I would say a year after that or so, I gave my life to Jesus. And from that point on, every once in a while, I found myself writing song lyrics, Christian type song lyrics, little choruses and that sort of thing. And then when I went back to college the second time to get my master's, I took some creative writing courses, poetry, and so I started delving into that, experimenting with the different things. One of my poems, which I may read today, is called Ode to a Coffee Cup, which is a response to a poem that I read by John Keats, Ode on a Grecian Urn, which you probably have heard of. And it was kind of a modern day response. So I just started playing around with that. Found myself writing more and more. I ended up when I was going to FIU, writing a story called Curry Chicken, which is, I had read the story Like Water for Chocolate. Laura Esquivel, I believe her name was. And basically each chapter she takes a recipe, and then she weaves a story into the cooking of the recipe. So I said, this looks fun. Let me write one on curry chicken. So I did that, and I've put that story out recently. It sat for a long time, but I recently put it out. And then my mother, she's from Westmoreland. She's a country girl from Westmoreland. And she would always tell us stories about Westmoreland and growing up, and her father was actually quite a bad man. And so one day I said, you know what? I think I'm going to write a novel about this. I had no clue how to write a novel. But the family was like, yes, do it. So it's taken me 13 years. It's basically, I set out to write historical fiction, which it is. But my editor, my professional editor, after she read it, she said, this is saga. So it's basically historical fiction, saga, and with world fiction poured into it, because with the novel, there are several things I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to, for Jamaicans, I'm trying to, in Marlon James' book, A Brief History of Seven Killings, he said, everyone lives in their own Jamaica. And when I read that, I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying with these novels, and it's going to be a series of 3 or 4 novels called Wood and Water Saga. For Jamaicans, I'm trying to give Jamaicans a different taste of the different Jamaicas. So, somebody living in one Jamaica don't understand somebody from another Jamaica. I give them a little taste for people to be able to say, oh, so that's like what it's like to live in that, not part of Jamaica so much as that maybe socioeconomic, maybe ethnic, maybe whatever part of Jamaica. So I have 3 characters. I hope I'm not jumping ahead of myself. Am I?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. So I have 3 characters. One is based on my mother, but very fictionalized. As a matter of fact, when she read the novel, she's read, different manuscripts of it. She's like, that is not me. And I'm like, yes, mama, but I've fictionalized your life. You are the seed for this. Then there's another character who he's mixed, and he's the son of an innkeeper. And then there is another fellow who actually came from Akampong, but when he was young, his mother died, and he was sent to this small village outside of where my mother lived. And so I'm trying to paint a picture of each of those, type of groups. Each novel will, like my next novel, one of the characters is going to be of Middle Eastern heritage, which a name like Mahfood, I am half Lebanese. So that's the type of thing I'm trying to do with the novels for Jamaicans. For the world, I'm trying to give a glimpse into the real Jamaica. Well, I shouldn't say the real Jamaica that is other than the tourism and the Bob Marley reggae, which of course are wonderful and are worth writing about. But I'm trying to give like a inside picture of what Jamaica is, so people get a better understanding. Part of that has to do with the patois, which I wrestled with, because the first time I wrote the manuscript, and I had several people read it, including Jamaicans. I had spelt it phonetically, and a lot of people had a hard time reading it, even Jamaicans. And so what I realized is I had to back off. And then the second time I fixed it, it was too bland. And even my daughter, who is born and raised American, she was like, Daddy, you have lost the Jamaican feel to the patois. So I had to go back in there and rework it. So that was an interesting experience. And I did have a talk with Amina Blackwood Meeks. I know Courtney, your friend, and perhaps Flavius as well. And we talked about it, and she said, you know what, I really liked what she said. She said, if you want to reach empire, you have to write in a way that empire can understand. So that's what I've tried to do with the patois, is give it a balance that hopefully has the flavor for Jamaicans, but people outside of Jamaica can understand it. So yeah, that's a little bit an introduction. Again, I think I got carried away, but thank you.
Dale, do you have your first poem that you have written?
Yes, I do. So it's interesting, as I've thought about it, my poems are not very Jamaican. My stories, like 2 of my short stories and my novel is Jamaican, but they are not. So this one has a hint of Jamaica in it. So I have a couple poems. One is called Ode to a Cup of Coffee. And like I said, it was a response to John Keats. What I did one day, I was reading his poem and I said, let me print this out. And I squashed it to the left, kind of left column, and I left a lot of space on the right. And for every line, I wrote sort of a response, a modern response, and then I took that and created this poem. So yeah, so here we go. Ode to a coffee cup. Enchanted cauldron of the liquid lady, dark love child of chaos and haste, mountainous inventor of conventional tales made more legitimate by these world rhythms, steaming, streaming upward past your lip outfolded, caressing human senses from Sumatra to the Blue Mountains. Ambient rock music, raucous reggae, debke dancing, street musicians pulsing vibrations as change and a leaf merge into an emptied cup. Two sets of lovers lounge on either side of the cafe. One fulfills their desired passionate kiss, another, with withered brow, parts with bitter sorrow. To the bliss of one and annoyance of another, like a New England day, the temperature changes. A wearied musician packs up to go, the ebb and flow of life growing hot and cold, an espresso steam pipe heating cold to hot, passion satisfied only to wane, then rekindle. A fellowship of three communing around a table, sip and speak at length over a leathered book. Open to a ribbon marker 3/4 way, the once for all time sacrifice, each having towns and cities awaiting their return, streets brimming with the din of the heavy laden. O machine formed in printed shape, reflecting crests of humans, plants, and imagined beasts upon your breast. O burning reflection, seldom do we have the time to consider that in between your brief life, you beckon us recall. Do not be too concerned about your yesterdays or tomorrows. Today has ample of its own. That is enough to know. Thank you.
Wow, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes.
I know it's a type of poem that requires, more than one reading to kind of get it, but.
Yeah, yes, I guess that's really for an English literature class,
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. I actually, with my FIU literature class, I do Ode on a Grecian urn, and we analyze that. And then I read this. We don't go into depth in it, but I read this as an example of how poets kind of stand on one another's shoulders, and we learn from one another, we respond to one another. So.
Yeah, that is so true.
Excuse me.
Yes, recently we spoke about your mom and that she is also a poet, or she's written some poems, and I know that you would like to read, some of your mom's poems, so we'll just give you this opportunity to do that, because
Okay.
on this format and this program, we really love poetry,
Beautiful. And I'm glad, because I do too. So this is a book. I was able to publish it for her, and she is so happy. My mother is 88 years old. She's a wonderful woman. She's a strong Jamaican woman. You know how a Jamaican woman can strong? Well, she's one of them. And she's been like, the rock and the fortress for our family. She's accomplished so much in her life. And, one day I had started a little writing group called the Inkwell. And so I invited her. She had not really written. And she said, I don't know about that. Then she says, all right, I'm going to do it. Then the next day she come back and she said, I quit the Inkwell. I said, what do you mean you quit the Inkwell? It don't even start yet. And she said, well, I quit. And then she laughed, because that's the way she is. And she said, I wrote a poem last night. So I do not remember which one was the poem. Oh, no. Boy, there's so many good poems in here. I want to give you a choice. There's one called A Simple Smile, which is the title poem, and it's about her mother. There's one called Born on a Horse, and you see how feisty she is. And then there's one the other one I can think of is, there's so many great ones. It's called The Wicked City. It's about Port Royal. Which one you guys want to hear?
Well, go ahead with the Wicked City for now. But I think maybe we can hear them all. We have time.
Okay, okay. So here we go, The Wicked City. Where she came up with this, I don't know. And by the way, again, she's the type who, whenever she sets herself to something, she masters it. So she's done a fantastic job with poetry in the short time she's been writing. The Wicked City, 1692. British pirates roamed the seas, then anchored for a time of wild frolicking. Bars and brothels occupied every corner of this busiest and wealthiest Caribbean port. The little church Sunday service was over. A minister had preached, then closed the door. He was seen entering the Ramgoat pub. Wine goblet in hand, he took a swig. The earth shook. Buildings were quickly falling. He saw the city disappearing into the ocean, hundreds of ships sinking under the tsunami waves to become the richest repository of historic shipwrecks. Thousands of people drowned that day. Two-thirds of this wicked city sank beneath the sea. Madness now living within his mind, he thought, could I be drunk after just one sip? His head possessed with thoughts of unbelief, he turned. The city had sunk on that side too. Dropping the goblet, the wine spilled. There was nowhere to run. Then it was over. Calm again, the earth shook no more. The minister and other fortunate souls stood speechless. A narrow strip of land and a third of the city left behind. The church stood firm, untouched by this ordeal, left to tell the stories of those wicked days, our twisted buildings and damage everywhere. The old fort, now a place where visitors imagine a time when pirates ruled the waves and contemplate what it was like for the minister seeing all he saw that day. The wrath of God poured out on Port Royal, June 7, 1962.
Wow. So it's more or less a historical perspective, or it's just a fictional poem?
It's a little of both. This minister, and you may know this, I forget his name, is a real person that she read about, and I've read about him since. So she took the idea of this, writing it from this minister's perspective and what it would have been like. Even the Ramgoat pub, she made that one up because she thought she liked the sound of that. But yeah, it's sort of a narrative historical fiction poem.
So, okay, well, let's move back to you a little bit. You, in your synopsis, you said that you want to read something about Mr. Brown and the sacred coconut water.
Okay.
A short story. So let us hear it.
Okay. It's about 4 double-spaced pages long, so it's not too long. So the little backstory to this. Earlier this year, around February, I took Amina Blackwood Meek's course. This is a story, the one that she has in conjunction with UWI and the Jamaica Storytellers Foundation. And the end product was supposed to be a presentation that we do. It could be something you created or just something you're presenting on your own. And I decided to create something of my own. And I actually, because she talks so much about Anansi in the class, which was fascinating, I wanted to create an Anansi story. Kind of, because Anansi continues to live. He goes on forever. But as I played with the idea and I thought about it, I kind of got this feeling, you know what, I don't have the right to mess with the Anansi canon. That's not my business. So instead, I wrote a story, kind of a new folk story that I don't know if I'm going to write more of them or not, based around a family, a Jamaican family called the Browns. So Mr. Brown and the sacred coconut water. In the town of Middle Quarters, St. Elizabeth, lived Mr. and Mrs. Brown and their 3-boy picnic. One Saturday morning, Mr. Brown sat at the breakfast table praising his wife's good cooking. Mrs. Brown, I never tasted a better mackerel rundown in all my life. He rubbed his belly and continued, the only thing would top it off just right is a drink of sweet coconut water. He turned to two of his sons, Schoolie and Sweet Tooth, who were sitting at the breakfast table. Schoolie, his first son, was named so because he was always first in his class at school. Sweet Tooth, his second son, as you would expect, loved all things sweet. Addressing them, Mr. Brown said, the best coconut water I ever taste come from White House and Westmoreland. Boy, me would have loved to drink some. He got up, sat on the couch, rubbing his full belly, and closed his eyes. Mr. Brown had one more son called Washbelly. He had never paid him much mind since he was the youngest. Washbelly always found himself in the shadow of the older brothers, which was a constant source of heartache. And that day, he was particularly sad as his father had not included him in the coconut water conversation. After Mrs. Brown had excused the three boys from the breakfast table, they each left the house, individually thinking how they could fetch some coconut water and bring it back for their father. Schoolie sat down on a rock Schoolie sat down on a rock, thinking about where he could get some coconut water. Not long after, an idea came to him. He stood up from the rock, saying, I know where. I'll go down to Mr. Wood's grocery store and buy Poopa a bottle of coconut water. He promptly did so. He returned from Mr. Wood's grocery store. He placed the coconut water on the table in front of his father and waited for him to wake up. Presently, Mr. Brown opened his eyes and, surprised to find a bottle of coconut water in front of him, said, Is you bring me this coconut water, Schoolie? Yes, Papa, Schoolie replied with a smile. How you get it so quick? Because me use me head, Papa. Mr. Brown drank the water down in one gulp, then spewed it out of his mouth, saying, This is nothing like coconut water from Westmoreland. Is where you get it from? Down at Mr. Wu's store, Papa. You're smart, Schoolie, but sometimes smart people take shortcut. Schoolie hung his head and left the room. Well, sir, meantime, both Sweet Tooth and Washbelly, unbeknownst to one another, had taken the road out of Middle Quarters, leading to the south coast. As they were deep in thought, they had not noticed one another until they reached the outskirts of town. When they realized where they were both headed in the same direction, each boy admitted he was going to get coconut water for his father and was glad for the company. Upon reaching Luana, halfway to Black River, Washbelly turned to take a right on Brompton Road. Sweet Tooth asked Washbelly, Is where you take the right on when Black River is straight ahead? Washbelly looked at Sweet Tooth with surprise and said, I going to Westmoreland. Is where you going? Sweet Tooth laughed and said, I going to Black River. You will never get back before sundown, while I will get my coconut water and return home in time for dinner. Washbelly turned his face toward Westmoreland and kept walking. Sweet Tooth got to Black River by 12 noon and found a man selling fresh coconuts. After purchasing one, he asked the man to cut off the top, figuring he could present it to his father ready to drink. With the coconut secured in two hands, he headed back toward Middle Quarters. By the time he got to Luana, halfway to Middle Quarters, Sweet Tooth was well thirsty. He had spent all his money on the coconut water, so he couldn't stop to buy a drink, and the river he knew about was a far distance. Overcome with thirst, he drank just enough to wet his tongue. Before long, the little tongue wetting was worse than if he had never tasted the coconut water to begin with. So he drank the balance of it. Overcome with remorse, when he got to the river, he filled the coconut with water, hoping the jelly inside would sweeten the water by the time he reached Middle Quarters. Just before sundown, he arrived home and handed his father the coconut. Mr. Brown was pleased and immediately put his mouth to the opening of the top of the coconut, drinking down the water in one gulp. With his face screwed up, he spewed the water out of his mouth. "This is not coconut water. Boy, what trick you playing on your father?" Sweet Tooth hung his head and left the room. Well, sir, when night fell and only two of Mr. Brown's boys were seated for dinner, Mrs. Brown asked the boys where Washbelly was. Schoolie said he had not seen him all day. Mr. Brown turned to Sweet Tooth and asked him if he had seen. He knew. He wanted to, no, not wanting to lie, but being too ashamed that he had not followed Washbelly to Westmoreland, Sweet Tooth said he didn't know. Mrs. Brown started one piece of wailing for Washbelly. "My baby dead, my baby dead." This went on all night and all the next day, while Mr. Brown and the two boys went on a search for Washbelly. But Sweet Tooth knew the search was fruitless. That day, there was no breakfast, lunch, or dinner served as Mrs. Brown continued to boil yai water. Mr. Brown and the two boys returned shortly before sundown and sat around the empty table. While Mrs. Brown was crying, the front door creaked open and in stumbled Washbelly, clothes disheveled, face dirty, and barely holding on to a coconut. Mrs. Brown yelled, "My Washbelly is back, thank God." Then she asked, "Where you was, son?" Washbelly didn't have the strength to answer his mother. He only had the strength to walk slowly to his father and present him with the coconut. Mr. Brown took the coconut from Washbelly and asked, "Where you was, son? And where you get the coconut?" Washbelly simply answered, "Westmoreland. Me get it for you, Papa." When Mr. Brown realized what Washbelly had done, he exclaimed, "Kiss me granny neck back, look what the boy do." Then he looked at Washbelly and said, "Me can't drink it, son. Look at you. You sacrifice yourself on my behalf." He slid over on his chair, making space for Washbelly. "Me can't drink it, son, but come sit down beside me." Washbelly looked up at his father and said, "You must drink it, Papa. I do it because I love you." Mr. Brown could not speak for a time, and eye water ran down his face. Then he said, "All right, son, I will drink it under one condition." Washbelly smiled and said his father, "We must share the coconut water." Washbelly smiled and said in agreement, "Yes, Papa." Mr. Brown went outside and cut the head of the coconut off with his machete. Then he came inside. He sat down with Washbelly, raised the coconut high with two hands as though it were a sacred thing, and said, "One son too smart for him own good, the next son too greedy for him own good, is only this one son, the Washbelly, love for another's good." Jack Mandora, me not choose none.
Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful story.
Thank you. I actually have dedicated it to Jamaica on its 60th independence. And as a result, actually, I'm making it free to anybody who wants a copy of it. All they have to do is go to dalemahfood.com, click on the cover of the story, and they can get a free copy. So yeah, not a free hard copy, a free digital copy.
Okay, I see also under the synopsis that you have some Theta My Art, a poem with the place of discussing the place of religious poetry. Yeah, it's a flavor of a biblical psalm. Would you like to recite that for us?
I would love to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when I wrote it, it was one of those poems that just came, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not saying it's God give it to me, but you have to wonder when sometimes those things just come to you. And of course, I did go back and make changes and so on. Tether my heart. Tether my heart to your courts, O Lord. Make me to stand at the entrance of your sanctuary. Draw me into your holy of holies, where your fire burns the hottest, your coals purify the cleanest, where your love satisfies the deepest. Your heart leaves me speechless, on my knees, before your throne, kissing your feet. For you are like the Rocky Mountains in spring, cool air running down towards the valley, refreshing, delighting, restoring. You are like the Amazon forest, warm and earthy, displaying diversity. I am one variety. You are like the cliffs of Dover, pure white, brilliant limestone, a fortress withstanding the elements, protecting against the enemy's armaments. You are like the great Euphrates, flowing through every civilization, supplying good and evil generations with sun and rain. So tether my heart, steady my feet, draw my soul, that I might dwell in your courts forever.
Wow. Well, that sounded sort of personal, like a kind of personal devotional. Huh?
Yes, yes. A lot of my poems do come out of my devotions. After I've been reading the Bible, something just hit me, and I'm like, I have to write. So yeah. One of the one of my favorite lines is the one about the Euphrates flowing through every civilization, supplying good and evil with rain, sun and rain. And I think what inspired that was Langston Hughes' poem. I believe it's called Negroes Speak of Rivers. And that's one of my favorite poems. I actually teach that in conjunction with Claude McKay's, it just blanked, my mind blank.
If we must die.
If we must die, thank you. I teach that to kind of show the difference in tone. But yeah, I love that poem, and I think somehow it spilled out onto this page. Again, as you know, poets, we learn and are inspired and influenced by other poets. But yeah, this is a very personal poem for me.
I see. So talk about the place of religious poetry in the Jamaican atmosphere, really.
Yeah. Well, if I am not mistaken, the first real stuff, the podcast that I listened to was Brick Rose, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually, if I'm not mistaken, that's how I met Maxwinette, because somehow, because of that, I saw her on Facebook and we connected. But, you know, of course, Jamaica is perhaps one of the more religious countries in the world. As we always say, there's a church on every corner. I don't know if that's changing, but you know, religion, not just Christianity, but of course you have African-based Kumina and sort of the mixture, the revivalism, and of course you have Jewish and you have Muslim and so on. So Jamaica is a very religious country, and I think, you know, I don't know, maybe you guys could answer more, as I think you have probably been definitely been exposed more to Jamaican poetry than I have. But I would imagine it is an influence in the poetry world. Sorry to turn it back on you, but would you find that so or not?
Yeah, go ahead. It's okay. Go ahead.
All right. I don't know if you heard the question I asked.
No.
So, yeah, like I said, Jamaica is a very religious country, and I would imagine it's poetry, again, like Brick Rose's poetry. I think Maxwinette might write poetry. I know, no, not Maxwinette, Joanne Richards. She writes a lot of worship lyrics. So I don't, in your experience, again, sorry to throw the question back, but have you found that there's a lot of religious poetry in Jamaica?
Yes, yes. There's a whole lot, but I don't think it's that pronounced like the dub poetry, and the dub poets don't really talk about religious things. They really talk about the things that are happening, the
Right,
social, cultural stuff and all of that.
right. Yeah, and I do consider, of course, there's a fine line between lyrics and poetry. And of course, in a lot of songs, Jamaican songs that I hear reference to the Lord, to Jah, to to God, to the Spirit, that sort of thing. So I don't know, maybe that's something for me to explore a little further. Find more poets that are writing in this way. But I don't consider myself, well, I don't consider myself a Christian writer per se, but it's like whatever comes out comes out, and sometimes the poetry has nothing to do with Christian themes, and at other times it does. It just depends, And even a lot of my Christian poetry tends to have a little bit of an edge to it as well, where it's just kind of not your typical thing that you'd think of as Christian poetry. Maybe because I'm in my Christian poetry, it reflects a lot of my personal struggles, things I struggle with, So yes, I do have a poem called Caravan, and it imagines Joseph, when his brothers gave him away to the Ishmaelites to send to Egypt. And it imagines what he is feeling the whole time. And he's like, you can't do this to me. I'm the son of a rich man. You can't do this to me. So, and the whole poem, he's talking about that until finally he kind of breaks and he realizes, whatever God's will is God. And yeah, so that one is a little different from your typical Christian poem, a little more, a little edgy in a sense.
So let's talk a little bit about the future of Dale Mahfood and his writings, what are your expectations and all of that?
Well, I definitely, I'm publishing my book. It's a matter, actually, here's the author copy right here. I don't know if you can see it. It's called When. That line there says, not for sale. It's the author copy, so I can go in and make changes. That should be coming out in a couple months. And it's, like I said, it's going to be a series of either 3 or 4 novels. My wife is convinced it's going to be a TV series. I would love that. We'll see. But I'm just going to continue writing more and more. I retire in about 6 years. So as a teacher, so what I'm sort of doing is trying to gear up my author career so that by the time I've retired, I'm like in full gear, writing, books, putting out poetry books, doing things like that. I do have a lot of ideas of different books I'd like to write. One is sort of an Italian series as well. My wife is Italian, from Italian American, from up in Rhode Island, and I want to write a series of novels that have that connection between Rhode Island and Italy. I don't know. I have 100 million ideas. So if I could only live enough to write them all.
So Flavors,
Are you hearing me?
Oh yeah, no, I'm just hearing you now. Okay, do you have any question for Dale or?
Well, originally, when he started, I just want to find out if you did spend time, did you spend time in Westmoreland?
Yes. So again, I'm from Kingston, and ashamed to say, after I left Jamaica in the 70s, actually, I went back one time, but then it was 30 years until then that I hadn't come back.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was because I was like, you know, if I'm going to travel somewhere, I'm going to go somewhere I've never seen before. So that was kind of my reasoning. But then we had a family reunion. And so we went down for a couple of weeks. And after the family reunion, my mother took us to Westmoreland, where she's from. She's from Bluefields.
Okay.
From you know the Shafston. You ever hear of Shafston?
No.
That's where she grew. That's where she grew up. The Great House. Although I've given it another name in the novel. But anyway, sort of to protect the innocent. But yeah, it was lovely to go down there. Then when we were down there that time, we met the place we were staying at. The lady who was cooking our food, she told us about this other lady, Leela Anderson, who did a lot of like ministry, soup kitchen ministry and that sort of thing. So when we came back to the States, she was in New York at the time, we hooked up with her, and we started going down every year or two, bringing things with us, doing ministry with us. She's just a phenomenal lady. And so, yeah, I got to know Westmoreland really well. I love Westmoreland. I actually have lived in my mind in Westmoreland for 13 years as I've written this novel.
Yes.
And it's awesome. Are you from Westmoreland?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
I'm from St. Mary and St. Catherine.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful.
Went to school in Kingston.
You did?
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, so I do love Jamaica. I'm hoping to go down there later this year. There's a project that somebody, what you call it, sort of a docudrama that somebody has written, and they need a white Jamaican. And so they asked me if I will come down and act in it. No, I've never acted before, but the fellow, Jeffrey Anderson, actually. You're familiar with Jeffrey Anderson? I'm not sure if you know. He's an actor, Jamaican actor living in LA. He assured me he would walk me through everything. It's not a big part, so it's not a big deal. But I'm looking forward to coming down in that time.
Wonderful.
Yes, yes.
I live in Jamaica.
What's that?
I live in Jamaica.
You live in Jamaica? Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
What part? Kingston?
St. Mary.
St. Mary, okay.
St. Mary, Portland, yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, yeah. So if we have time, could I read another one of my mother's poems?
Yeah, but you could read two.
Okay, two.
Yeah.
All right, so first I'll read the title poem. It's called, and by the way, I want to let you know, there is digital copies and there are an audio copy. A really wonderful friend of mine, Janet Webby, who is audio narrator. She's a Jamaican. She recorded it for us, and I offer it free, both the digital copies and the audio. I offer it free. All you have to do is go to dalemahfood.com. For that one, you'd have to sign up for my email list. You don't have to for the Cook Mr. Brown story. And then just tell me you want a copy of A Simple Smile, and I'll be glad to give. Just tell me whether you want the digital or the audio. But anyway, here we go. A Simple Smile. The woman I'll call mother. This little lady was never a bother. The sacrifices for her 5 untold, her patience a model to behold. She never wavered from her smile. I love your smile, mother. Your silent endurance and steadfast love shown to me through your loving smile. I was young and I didn't understand the sad times hid behind that simple expression. Strength so obvious through a beaming face, You sacrificed so a normal childhood we could have. You taught me how to knit and sew, which has saved a fortune as my children grew. This gift of joy received from you taught me happiness when things go wrong, much gained from your enduring smile. There was a time when I thought you were so weak. How could you concede to trials you often faced? These times made my anger boil. You should fight back hard, I thought. I wanted to take over and fight your fight. Instead, you loved me with your protective smile. We five left the nest and went our way, but only to return and whisk you away. Abused no more, an unhappy silent past left behind. You brought with you a joyful heart. It was our crown to give you happiness until your end. We enjoyed you, Mother. God gave you a silent golden strength. The rays that glittered from your smile now shine on me today. You gave me everything. You gave me life. I smile and say, God filled me with her strength.
Wonderful.
So, and there is, I won't read it, but there is a simple smile afterwards where it gets a little deeper into it, and just the hardship that my grandmother had. You know, sometimes living in a great house is not so great, if you know what I'm saying, because everybody lives in their own Jamaica. This is an example of, you know, somebody, oh, they live in a great house. Not always so great. And my grandmother endured a good bit, but she only put up with it for the sake of her children, as good mothers often have to do. So, born on a horse, this is now about my mother. I was 3 when my father put me on a donkey, quite young when I began to ride alone, ridden goats, cows, donkeys, mules, horses. I even rode a pig one day, the smoothest ride of all, the mule for sure. Rode standing on a horse, lay on the back of a donkey as he walked down a steep incline. Thrown from a horse galloping under a pimento tree, a branch took me to the ground, threw me into a pile of stones and nettles. I quickly got up and ran after the horse, mounted him again, and off we went. Swam in the ocean with my horse, under unlimited blue skies. On Sundays, rode by myself to church. Hardly a day when I did not ride, never liked to repeat a track. There was always an adventure on a new path. At 17, I got a job with a tour company, which was on Harbor Street in Kingston. I heard about the horses on at a racetrack. One day after work, I went to inquire. Here I introduced myself to the stable owner and asked him if I could ride on one of his horses. He replied, "These are race horses. You can't ride them." I answered, "I know how to ride." But again, he echoed, "My child, you don't understand. These horses are race horses. You are at Knutsford Park, and over there is the racetrack. Do you want to get killed?" I quietly replied, "Sir, I won't get killed. I was born on a horse. I have even broken in young and wild colts for riding myself. I can ride your horses if you will let me." With that, he called the attendant who brought out a horse. He told me, "Go ride and let me decide." At the gate, I mounted this gorgeous, well-kept animal. He was washed and groomed and precisely shod. For a moment, I thought I was in a wild dream. Then my thoughts brought me back to the track. As the gate opened, the horse jumped forward. In a flash, we galloped around Knutsford Park racetrack. Wow, could he move! It was the fastest I had ever been. I was excited, exhilarated, and in my element. I'm here riding a horse, a racehorse, the dream of my life. My brothers will be jealous when I tell them. Every evening after work, I would help exercise a horse or two. Adventures have never been rare for me, but this was truly an experience never to be forgotten. The wind blowing in my face as I gallop around the track, I see such joy in your smile as you fly past the gate, the stable owner said. Thank you, Mr. Zadie, for believing in me, a girl from Westmoreland, born on a horse. And that is my mother in a nutshell.
I love that. Yes, I love that.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful.
So,
It's a beautiful story.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
she has so many of them, and she chose to record them in poetry, which I'm so pleased at, because number one, it's our family will have it forever.
Yes.
And number two, it records a time in Jamaica and a place in Jamaica, where for people to be able to look back and go, oh, okay, that was what things were like back then.
Yeah.
And she does record other poems that are more modern as well, and that are not necessarily in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wonderful. Courtney.
Yes. So a quick thing before we go on there. I see you have a quote here by Chuck Smith. Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be broken. Is that your favorite quote?
It is one of them. So he was a pastor of I don't know if you've ever heard of Calvary Chapel in the States. He was the one who started it, and he used to say that all the time. Of course, there are not 9 Beatitudes. The Beatitudes are only 8, but he made that one up. And I do like it because I've come to realize that things don't always go the way I want them to go. And so I just have to bob and weave and move on to the next thing. So yes.
Yeah, Courtney. Yeah, we need to invite Mr. Mahfood to one of our critiques. Tell him a little about that.
Yeah. Yes, he knows it because he had watched the critique on Claude McKay's If We Must Die. So
wonderful.
But I know that it's with school coming up and all of that, I know it's going to be difficult for him. Maybe we'll just have to ask him about, how it's Friday. Because we normally do the critiques on a Friday, the 3rd Friday of every month.
Yes.
So, I don't know if it's possible for you with your, with your school schedule and all
There
that.
There is nothing I would love more than to participate. But yeah, the school schedule is not going to allow it, because even if it was lined up at lunchtime, it's not that long of a lunch. But I really enjoyed the Claude McKay discussion, critique. And I think I might have mentioned that Claude McKay is a very important part in my novel. Yeah. That poem as well, If We Must Die, because one of the main characters is undergoing such personal anguish from the community he's living in that somebody introduces him to the poem with the idea of help, and really introduces him to Harlem Shadows with the idea of trying to help him see that that this community that I've called Hakeem is really has their own issues, and he needs to be more compassionate towards them. But instead, he finds this poem and he misappropriates it, and it drives him to do some bad things, which eventually are resolved. But, it's interesting because I heard somebody say on that discussion that Winston Churchill had used the poem, and I cannot find where he used it. I've found that nobody really knows. There's no evidence that he did use it. It may be just something somebody has said. But we do know that people from the time Claude McKay wrote it have used it, to, I guess, support and give them courage to do the things they need to do. People from all sorts of backgrounds. It's an amazing poem. And if I could just say one more thing about it, because I just love the poem. As it was talked about in the discussion, it's written as a Shakespearean sonnet. And the poem it's almost as if you white people consider us hogs, but look what I can write. But it's amazing. It's just, it's for me, it's one of the most powerful poems. Not only in the beauty and the technicality of it, but in the message it brings.
Very direct, yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. We have some wonderful writers have come out of Jamaica and are coming out of Jamaica. I'll mention my good friend, maybe one day you'll have her, Linda Edwards. She's written 3 books now, and the second book is called Friendship Estate. And again, she's written several things. One on, I won't go into detail, but she found an ancestors book that basically said, from like right after emancipation, that basically said, if we had done emancipation this way, things would have been so much better for everybody. And so she took that book and she wrote a historical fiction novel called Friendship Estate, set in the 1700s, mostly in Jamaica and partially in Britain. So she's a fantastic writer as well. A lot of good new writers coming up.
Wonderful.
As a matter of fact, we have invited her, but I think there was CARCON, our conference, and she had put us off. And I am supposed to get back to her and talk with her again, to reschedule a time for her.
All right, so this will be a little motivate. Sorry.
No, so we'll definitely have her on sometime, maybe next month or thereabout.
Good. So this will be a little motivation. So the thing that I'm going to go act in, she wrote it.
Okay.
And it's about Marcus Garvey. And again, one of her relatives, a different relative from a different side of the family, had written a book about one of the Ashenheims that she's related to, who defended Garvey. So she's quite an amazing woman. Her knowledge of Jamaican and Caribbean history challenges most anybody's. And she's a great writer on top of it. So yeah, I think it would be wonderful if you had her. Nice.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Dale. And we'll definitely talk again. I know your schedule for it will be very difficult, but maybe we'll see you sometime in the fall.
Yes, maybe over like the Thanksgiving holiday or the Christmas holiday or something. I would be glad to come back on. I can't thank you enough for having me on. It's been a real pleasure being here.
Well, we are very happy to have had you. Very, very happy.
You.
And I know all our listeners and viewers will be very happy also.
Wonderful. If I could just make one last shameless plug.
Yeah,
go to dalemahfood.com and sign up for my newsletter. I give away short stories, and as my novel comes out, like I'm going to be giving away the first 5 chapters before it comes out, people can get. But yeah, so please, I'd encourage people to do that. I'd love to have them join me on my journey, as they say.
Wonderful. We will definitely put that out there for you.
Thank you, sir.
Definitely, yes. And we will sign up also.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And we hope that you will subscribe to our channel to help keep us going.
I will do that. So I'm trying to think if I am. I think I've subscribed to the podcast part.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's fine.
Absolutely. I check that out from time to time. Wonderful. And
now we have put on our website a television section where all our podcasts, you can see them there now.
I went and checked out some of them. That's where I saw the Claude McKay one. Very nice.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So
yeah.
That is where we are heading now in a big way.
Wonderful. I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much. Do you want to close off, Courtney?
Okay, we just want to thank Dale again for being here with us. That's Dale, and you can check out DaleMahfood.com and get some of his latest works. Surely it was a wonderful session with you, Dale, and we're just here. We can't thank you enough. We've gotten some historical perspective of that Jamaica, some part of Jamaica, and I particularly like that poem, "The Wicked City," that your mom did.
Yes, oh yeah.
And it really, I just sent me to go and do some research and about that particular incident of the earthquake and the pastor, because I didn't really take note of that pastor's story. So, I found it very interesting and intriguing.
Real quickly, there is a fellow who just put a book out about that, historical fiction about that. He's a Jamaican.
Okay.
If I can get the information, I'll send it to you.
Yes, please. Thanks.
Yeah, we'll definitely appreciate it. And, it's so good. So, but I am also thinking, one day if we could get your mom on, or when you come next time, you can bring your mom, we'd surely appreciate to hear her voice and, doing some of our poems.
That would be lovely, but she is actually not well. And
Okay.
yeah, so I would love to, and she would love to if she was better, but thank you for the offer. I'll tell her.
Yes.
Yeah, so with that, we'll just close our program for the day. So back to you, Flavors.
Thank you all. Thank you, viewers and listeners of the Real Stuff podcast. As we close, we'll ask Queen Lubafu to give us the Our Father in the Garifuna language, and Tafina will take us out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. God bless.
You lead us to Fula. You belong far away away. Ajuguala lebabu seru. Lida mua, lida sungfula. Lida mua, lida sungfula.
Well, unfortunately, this is it. Till next time. Bless.
All you gotta do is just speak. One word is enough, and I'm no longer so rough. I forget what I was trying to say. I no longer do what I was gonna do, but you're no good for me. That's why me know what set me if it could flee. Me I fi take away me